What's up, everybody? I hope y'all are having a wonderful day. I'm Anthony. On today's video, I wanted to talk about why I do not use pallets in my garden. Stay tuned. Now, first things first, I want to make sure I'm completely clear when I say this. There is a reason why I titled my video, "This is why I do not use pallets in my garden," not "you are wrong for using pallets in your garden." So if you are currently using them, do not think I'm personally attacking you. You are an adult. You are entitled to do whatever you want on your own property. I'm just laying out examples and reasons why I don't do it, because maybe my argument might be enough to sway you to my side. That's it. Now, in order for me to make an effective argument so you don't use pallets in your garden like me, I have to make sure that we are all on the same page in a few basic facts. If you are going to source pallets for your garden, you're probably going to come across one of four markings, all right? The first one's going to be HT, meaning heat treated. Heat treated pallets are treated up to about 104 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees Celsius to kill any bugs that may be in that wood so it doesn't start decomposing right as they make it, all right? KD, or it means kiln dried, means all that wood is put into a kiln so it's under 19% moisture in the wood so it doesn't warp right after they make it. No one wants a warped pallet. The sulfuryl fluoride is a pesticide, basically do the same thing as heat treated. It kills the pests, so again, they cannot start decomposing that wood. And methyl bromide is a very, very toxic pesticide used for that same reason. Now, the general lifespan for any pallet is between 4 and 10 years. Obviously, if you are in a hotter or a wetter climate, it's probably going to last less than if you live in a colder or a drier climate, all right? Moisture makes wood rot. That's all it is. So usually the pallets you see out there are going to last somewhere between 4 and 10 years. And finally, the average price to make a pallet these days usually ranges between $11 and $12 to actually make it. Now, a lot of companies do not make their own pallets. They outsource that. So obviously, if it costs about $12 to make a pallet, that company is probably paying somewhere in the range of $20 to $25 for that pallet. So these things aren't exactly cheap. That's why you're going to see a lot of companies like Lowe's, Walmart, Home Depot, who take it kind of personally when you go out back and try to steal their pallets, because again, you're stealing from the company. So when you're able to source pallets, make sure, that's one thing I kind of wanted to mention, make sure if you are sourcing pallets, you're doing so legally and you're not stealing from somebody. All right, so now the whole point of the video. Why am I so against using pallets in the garden? For some reason these days, I don't know what it is about Instagram or these like hippie people that think that, hey, you can use reclaimed materials to use things for growing your own food. But it's becoming cool to use pallets to grow food. More so like a lot of these pictures. Oh yeah, some of these might look cool. Hey, you could plant strawberries between this pallet grooves, or hey, you can do this, or you can section off a raised bed using pallet wood. Pallets are free or cheap or blah, blah, blah. I get it. I understand it. But there's a lot of concerns when it comes to pallets a lot of people are not mentioning, and it drives me insane. Now, the biggest argument I hear for people who want to use pallets in their garden or whatever is the fact that methyl bromide is being phased out. Yes, that's true. It is being phased out. But just because it's being phased out doesn't mean it has been phased out. Okay, phasing out and phased out are completely two different tenses of a verb, all right? The fact of the matter is California was still using methyl bromide. California now, the ones who are like hardcore about all things carcinogen, they were still using it as of 2016. So if pallets last between 4 and 10 years in 2016, that means there's probably a pretty good chance that there's a lot of pallets still on the market. Those same people might say, hey, well, these pallets all here are heat treated. That might be true. They might be all well and dandy. Hey, you have some HT treated pallets. But one thing you don't know is unless you were actually there during that pallet's building and seen the life cycle of the pallet, you don't actually know what was on that pallet, okay? And that's probably the biggest thing I always talk to people about when they ask me, hey, do you use pallets in your garden? I say, absolutely not, for this reason. When you ship anything, it can go anywhere and it can be used to carry anything, all right? So when you may have, yeah, okay, I got an HT pallet, this thing's been heat treated, so there's been no chemicals on it. That could have been used by AutoZone to carry a whole bunch of brake cleaner. That could have been used by a local car dealership to carry engine degreaser. It could have been used by an agriculturist or someone who may be growing things to carry undiluted glyphosate. So you don't know what's been on that pallet. And I can tell you point blank, because I've worked in industrial situations my whole life, that it doesn't really matter what's been on that pallet. If that pallet's not broken, we're going to reuse it, okay? So follow my train of thought here. If you're driving a truck, you got 30 pallets in the back carrying all kinds of crazy chemicals, and all of a sudden some idiot cuts you off and you slam on brakes and you feel your load shift, okay? Happens all the time. That load shifts, maybe just 2 inches. Well, that 2 inches could cause something maybe on top to spill down onto those pallets. When someone like me unloads that truck and sees, hey, there's maybe some motor oil or something on these pallets, do you think we throw those away? Absolutely not. We dabble up some of the stuff and put the pallet back into rotation. That's all it is, folks. When I worked at Toyota, I could tell you point blank, we would stand on pallets to crank out the gear lube or gear oil to use in our differentials. If I spilled some because I was talking or looking around or wasn't paying attention, and I spilled some on that pallet, all I did was grab a red rag, clean up the excess, and walk away. So yeah, these pallets have petrochemicals and all kinds of crazy stuff in them, and they might not be labeled as such. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Just because something may be kiln dried or heat treated doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't see a whole lifespan worth of carrying chemicals, solvents, or nasty, nasty stuff. Now, another point that I wanted to make that a lot of people don't really consider, I know I didn't consider it till a couple years ago, is the fact that a lot of these pallets aren't made stateside. And if they are made stateside, it doesn't generally mean they stayed stateside. You could be using a pallet in your garden that might have been to 16 different countries. Well, as we know with international trade, you know, from the 1900s when we had a whole bunch of invasives come over the United States, where we started to really consider, hey, we need to put in some customs officials here to understand that bad things can come from overseas and deplete natural stuff. There's a lot of checks and balances here. And a lot of countries, third world countries especially, they don't take kindly to having invasives coming, you know, to their land, and I wouldn't either. So in order to nip that in the bud, before they even open a lot of these containers, they might spray inside that container with pesticides, fungicides, something in there to kill whatever's inside so it's not being brought to their border. Well, if you have a whole bunch of pallets that might be carrying car parts, they say, well, there's no food in here, so I'm going to probably spray the most nasty chemicals I can under it, close the door, and let it sit for 4 or 5 days just to make sure that it's completely clean and safe. Then they're going to do that, and they do that. All right, so this isn't something that's like theoretical. They really do this. Well, they did that to that pallet. There's no record of it actually happening. They take the car parts off, they load up their trade goods on that same pallet and ship it back to the United States. So again, you may have a pallet that you see, oh, this thing was just used to carry corn or something harmless. That doesn't mean that's the only lifespan or the only time it's ever been used. These things have been used for 4 to 10 years. They could have seen hundreds of trips carrying some really nasty stuff. Now, are you going to want to use that pallet to grow food in your garden where food's physically going to be touching it? Not me. I wouldn't want to do that. But hey, again, this is all up to you. Again, I'm going to make sure I clarify. I'm not saying you're wrong for using them in your garden. If you want to go ahead and do that, by all means, please do. I'm just giving you guys a fair warning, hey, heads up, that these are the things that are out there, and this is the stuff that could have been on that pallet. So you might want to think twice before using one of those things surrounded by your food, because one of the biggest catch-22s that I'm noticing is when people ask me if they can use pallets in their garden, I ask them, why are you growing your own food? And most of them will tell me, about 90% of them will tell me, because I don't want my food sprayed with chemicals. Well, if you don't want your food sprayed with chemicals, why would you use a pallet that's been sprayed with chemicals? You know what I mean? Like, so there it is. That's why I don't use pallets in my garden. I suggest if you have the opportunity to use something else, you absolutely do it. I would much rather go into the woods like right here, chop down a few trees, make raised beds out of these guys versus use a pallet. No way would I use one of those. So just giving you all a heads up. If you agree or disagree, please put it down in the comment section below. I am more than willing to have a coherent, logical conversation about this if you disagree with me. Again, I'm not trying to point out you're wrong. I'm just trying to lay down the foundation for my side of the argument to maybe sway you if you didn't consider some of these problems, okay? If this video helped you at all, please do me a humongous favor and give me a thumbs up. It absolutely helps out my channel and I would very much appreciate it. Subscribe and I'll catch y'all later, okay?